Welcome to the first episode of Score Hub. I'm your host, Greg Kimlo. Hoops, Super Bowl contenders, FIFA World Cup, lots of controversy to talk about in the sports world, which is why it's important we keep score. Joining me today is Cameron Brennan.
Hello everyone, happy to be here.
In addition to James Payne.
Me as well.
I will introduce topics that will lead these two in a sports debate. Each valid argument will receive a point, and at the end of the game, like any sporting event, whoever has the top score wins. So let's get started. Are you both ready to play?
I think I am, yeah.
Ready.
Alright, awesome. So the first question is, should Nike be concerned about the NBA jerseys ripping? Cam, we'll start with you.
For me, no. Just because Nike's such a big company, a multi-billion-dollar company, they know how to fix this and they know how to fix this early. They've used this technology before where it's melted recycled bottles, and they're using this in soccer jerseys, and they're also using these same jerseys in the WNBA, FIBA, the NBA, and the G League now. And we haven't seen any concerns in those other three leagues, so maybe it's just the physicality of the NBA, and Nike's always a team that, as great product testers as they are, they always know how to regroup and always move forward and fixing any problems that come along. And we've seen 6 cases of it with some of the biggest stars in the NBA, LeBron James, Kevin Love, Ben Simmons, for example. I think it's more so just maybe their style of play that means they're more aggressive, and since they're the top players in the league, players have to get physical with them, and that's resulting in these jerseys tearing.
Those are all valid arguments. James, how do you agree or disagree with Cam?
I disagree a little bit. I think they should be concerned, not so much for the teams and the players actually wearing them, because these teams have plenty of money. It doesn't hurt them if they have to rebuy jerseys for players like LeBron, Kevin Love, as Cam mentioned. But for the consumers, basketball's a physical sport. A lot of people love playing pickup ball, and even if they're just messing around and give someone a little tug, just a friendly foul, it's going to rip, and the consumers are going to get unhappy. So in the end, Nike eventually will probably have to figure out a refund, because consumers are going to be mad if they rip, the first time they wear it out. So Nike's going to have to figure something out and be able to defend themselves.
Right, those are all valid points. We actually recently saw Thaddeus Young rip his own jersey at the collar area out of frustration. And when the situation started happening, Mark Parker, the CEO of Nike, said that they had the situation under control and were implementing a solution. However, the tears continue to happen. I agree with you, James. I think the consumers are the ones to worry about. So Cam, how would you answer the argument that fans who like to wear their NBA jerseys when they play pickup games, how can they be confident as a buyer for the product?
And again, too, when you wear some of these jerseys go for $100 jerseys. Some people, they want to maintain their uniqueness and only wear them for those games. If players want, or pickup players and avid fans want to wear them during their game, they should know that that's a risk. Any fabric or any piece of clothing that if you play a sport, it has the possibility of getting ripped as well. So you know well enough, if you go out and play pickup basketball, and if you're someone who's physical and someone has to be physical on you playing in the post or out on the 3-point line or whatnot, you know that what you're wearing has a possibility of getting torn regardless of what fabric it is. You're not wearing a steel jacket here, you're just wearing something that has the ability to be torn. And it's not something against Nike that it's more likely to rip or whatnot. It just shows that fans purchasing what they want. Would you spend $100 on a shirt that could be ripped if you play, or just wear a typical $5 shirt? For those fans that want to feel that they're in the game and want to wear those jerseys, that's all for them. But it's part of knowing that it could happen, possibly.
Those are all fair points. And James, when can the customers kind of run out of patience and start to get angry with Nike? Because Mark Parker even said that there haven't really been complaints by consumers. When do you think that's going to start becoming more widely known, if this problem continues?
Well, if it does continue, it'll take some time for more consumers to purchase jerseys, wear them, and have them get ripped. But Cam mentioned a point about money and how it costs consumers $100. But then again, we look at the contract Nike has with the NBA, 8 years, $1 billion. That's a heck of a contract. And if consumers start to get mad, the NBA will start to get mad. If consumers aren't purchasing their product, yes, it's Nike's jerseys, but it's also the NBA's product. So eventually, a consumer getting mad will lead to the league getting mad, and that's what Nike doesn't want. So the sooner they can fix this and prevent consumers from getting mad, the better it will be for them.
Alright, excellent. Up next, we have pretenders or contenders. Are the Philadelphia Eagles really Super Bowl contenders? James, we'll start with you.
Absolutely. They're 7-1, or excuse me, 9-1 now. They're the best team in football. They have a heck of an offense. Quarterback in Carson Wentz, who's proven his worth this season. They just picked up Jay Ajayi at the trade deadline. So between him and LeGarrette Blount, they have a solid duo running the ball. Obviously, Ajayi can be used more out of the backfield. Blount, powerful runner, right up the middle through the line. We saw him in the past give him the ball at the 1 yard line. He's going to punch it in the end zone for you. That's an easy solution for them, so they have no problem scoring points. But when you look at the other teams in the West, Seattle, they haven't had a consistent run game this year. Russell Wilson can't carry them, and their defense is starting to have injuries. We saw Richard Sherman tear his Achilles. Cam Chancellor was just ruled out recently, so they're going to start to fall apart. Cowboys, division opponent, they still play each other twice, so if the Eagles can win 1 or 2 of those games, the Cowboys will be done. Not to mention Ezekiel Elliott's suspension just taking into effect now this week, so he's done for 6 of the final 7 games for the Cowboys. And then the Rams and Vikings, they're the other 2 teams to compete with in the NFC. They're still young. I mean, you look at the quarterbacks, Case Keenum and Jared Goff. Yes, Carson Wentz is also young, but they don't really have the experience that the Eagles will have. And one injury to those teams, that'll be a big problem, but the Eagles will be able to afford an injury or 2 as the season progresses.
Awesome, those are all fair comments. I like how you compare them to the other teams. And Cam, how do you kind of fight against that, or do you agree?
I think any of the top 6 teams in the NFC are contenders, but I don't think they're the outright contenders. They played their 9 games this year. You know how many teams they played that are over 500? 2. And they only have 1 loss, and now it's to the Kansas City Chiefs, who currently sit at 6-3. And their only other victory was against the Carolina Panthers in a very close game that finished 20-23. They haven't really tested themselves against the best of the NFC. You can be a great team, you can only play who's in front of you, I understand that. But you look at teams like New Orleans Saints that haven't lost a game since September when they started 0-2. And you mentioned experience. Drew Brees has won a Super Bowl and has led a team to that point. So how could you think that a young team like Carson Wentz and Jay Ajayi and everyone on that defense could possibly be an NFC and a Super Bowl contender? I think there's still a lot to go. Even though they've played 9 games, they still have to win 7 more. But it really, to me, thinks that they have a lot to go and they're not out in front contenders for me yet. If they play very well tonight against the Cowboys, without Ezekiel Elliott and a very, very short-handed defense of the Cowboys, maybe they can impress me. But once they go up against those teams in the playoffs, like the Minnesota Vikings, like the New Orleans Saints, I can't really take them as contenders, out in front contenders at least for now.
Alright, I like that. So one of the things is to keep in mind is the Eagles are only have 1 loss, and that 1 loss is on the road, and 3 of their last 7 games are on the road. Do you think that's a factor going into the playoffs?
I don't think it will be. Obviously, the toughest road game they'll face is Dallas tonight, but Dallas is without Ezekiel Elliott, as we mentioned. They're without Sean Lee, who is he's the quarterback of the Cowboys defense. So if they can win that game tonight, I think they'll be set. They'll likely finish 13-3, maybe even 14-2, have home field advantage, and then won't have to worry about playing on the road.
Absolutely. And James Cam talked a lot about the Cowboys and their matchup coming up. The Philadelphia Eagles have actually won 2 of the last 3 matchups between the 2. What are your predictions for that matchup?
I think it will be a great matchup tonight, but again, when you go on the road, anything can happen in the NFL. And you mentioned the road as well. The Eagles, they have 4 home road games left. Going to Seattle, CenturyLink Field, one of the toughest places to play in the NFL. That'll be very difficult. You mentioned before how that defense is very thin, but again, Russell Wilson is still a great quarterback, and he has a lot of offensive weapons as well that could give that Eagles defense some trouble. And then one team you didn't mention was the Los Angeles Rams, who are 7-2 and are playing right now against the Minnesota Vikings, who possibly could also be in contention for that #1 seed in the NFC. And they're going to have the home field advantage with Jared Goff, the season that he's having, and Todd Gurley, who is maybe even a secondary piece or maybe the focal point of that offense, not to mention one of the best scoring defenses in the NFL. I think this Eagles team still has a lot to prove. They're not out in front yet for me.
All right, that's pretty fair. But just one retaliation to that, James, maybe you could answer this. Cam says Eagles have a lot yet to prove. However, they have 8 players that have won a Super Bowl on that roster. How key is veteran leadership in the squad and in general?
It'll definitely show its factor as the season progresses. We get towards the end and during the playoffs. Yes, the Seahawks have been there, done that before. Cam mentioned the Saints, Drew Brees. But aside from Drew Brees, the Saints have a fairly young squad. They've really turned around this season, but anybody in that NFC South is completely inconsistent for me. But back to your original point, those 8 players, one being LeGarrette Blount, we know he's won Super Bowls with the Patriots. He's a key part of the offense and will be. I think that'll play a huge factor down the line. Excuse me.
All right. And Cam, any final comments to that rebuttal from James?
I just look at the other teams and how they're more tested already, whether it be Minnesota, who play the Rams today, the Rams, who I just said, play Minnesota today, Carolina, who's 7-3 and have gone up against tough competition in the Patriots already. They play the Saints twice this season. They play the Falcons twice this season. And if we're talking contenders in general, Pittsburgh and New England as the AFC contenders as well, they're more ahead of me because of that experience. And you mentioned experience before, how it's important to have it. Again, the Patriots have been to 3 Super Bowls in the last few years, and it really shows how important that experience is on the AFC side. So those 2 teams know how to play. A very young team. We saw Atlanta last year. They got to the peak and the pinnacle, but then they couldn't finish.
All right, awesome. I think the Philadelphia Eagles are very well on their way to the Super Bowl. I think their roster is impressive, especially with the Super Bowl experience on the team. And I think in addition with, as you mentioned, James, with Ezekiel Elliott being out, I think this is a guaranteed, almost guaranteed win for the Eagles, and it'll keep them hot and keep them rolling throughout the rest of the season into the playoff picture. And just a little score review. James, you are currently leading with 7 points, and Cameron, you have 6, just right there. And we'll continue this ongoing discussion. We're going to go into talk about the 2018 FIFA World Cup, pros and cons of a country hosting the event. And first we're going to start off with Cameron. What do you think? Do you think it's a positive thing for a country or a negative thing?
I think it's a positive thing as a morale for a country. I think it's excellent to have it. And if the World Cup is done right, it can be a great effect economically and infrastructure-wise as well. It brings a lot of pride to the nation as you are hosting the entire world for a great event that goes on for an entire month. And it leads you into hosting future events as well. We look at the last World Cup in 2014, Brazil. They then held the 2016 Rio Olympics. Russia held the 2014 Olympics. They are now hosting the 2018 World Cup. Japan, back in 2002, World Cup. Now they're hosting the 2018 Olympics coming up in a few months. And then you look at Los Angeles, who are in a tri-bid with Canada and Mexico to host the 2026 World Cup. They've already been given the 2028 Olympics. So I think it shows that countries that want to do it, it will open more avenues for them to host major events like this, which leads to the economy boosting, leads to stock in your country boosting as well, and it really is a huge event and a huge benefit for the country.
Those are all positive things in societal, economic, and government standards, it seems like. James, would you agree or disagree?
I agree in the short term it's great, especially when you have countries like Russia, go back to 2010 with South Africa. These countries aren't guaranteed to qualify for the World Cup and when they go through the regular qualification process. But as hosts, they get the automatic bid hosting the World Cup. That's great for them, and that brings a lot more pride out of the natives in the country as well. But on the long term, it's not so great. Yes, Cam mentioned that Russia held the Olympics a few years ago in Sochi. There's stadiums and arenas there that are already desolate. In Brazil, it's a sad sight looking at some of these stadiums that they spend billions of dollars and years of building they just fall apart. No one uses them after a short time. So for some of these smaller countries, yes, it's good. You get the spotlight for a month, but then there's so many other ethical factors that go into it. How the money doesn't get used, the unfair conditions of the workers, as we see in Qatar preparing for the 2022 World Cup. So there are a lot of pros and cons, but overall, if the country isn't already suitable for it, I don't think they should be the ones hosting it.
One thing to think about is that Russia's Vladimir Putin is known to using sporting events to pull off some sly political statements. He, in the 2014 Olympics, took over Crimea from Ukraine, and actually Ukraine is trying to prevent Russia from hosting the World Cup. Can we expect that Russia will kind of pull off something during the World Cup again that may affect their ties government-wise and their Western unions?
I don't think so. Unfortunately for Ukraine, they failed to qualify, but from a political point of view, that might be better for this instance. I think we would have seen something by now. I think it would be a little too late for anything like this to happen, but again, it's Putin, who knows? He doesn't have the best track record. We'll cross that bridge when we get to it in 7 months' time, when the World Cup gets underway in June. But for everyone's sake, I hope that the focus is on the games being played, the passion being displayed by the fans. And yes, it is competitive, but it's great to see the peacefulness that comes out for at least these 31 days in June and July.
And Cameron, you mentioned a lot of pros of hosting the World Cup. Are you concerned at all with Putin's reputation for Russia to be hosting this large, well-populated event?
No, I'm not, just because last year this past summer at least, the Confederations Cup was held in Russia as almost a precursor to the World Cup, and Putin was very welcoming, and he wanted everyone to be welcome to Russia and explore and look past all the political difficulties that they see and explore the very vast country that is Russia and explore their history and whatnot. But with that precursor being said, Putin didn't pull any stunts, he didn't make any splash in the political world, he didn't make any splash in foreign policy at all. He wanted to make sure it was strictly just soccer for the 3-week event. And that being said, I think he'll do the same with the World Cup, because the entire world will be watching, and if Putin pulls a big stunt, the entire world will have a lashback at Putin because he pulled this stunt.
Alright, awesome. Very well arguments. You have one more comment,
Can I make
James?
one more point about this?
Yes.
Obviously, from an American's point of view, it's sad that the US failed to qualify, but with everything going on between Trump and Putin and the election last year and the Russians, maybe it's a good thing the US failed to qualify too from a political point of view.
That's a very good remark. Who knows? Two hotheads. But hopefully it all just comes down to just playing soccer.
I would have liked to see Trump go to Russia and attend some of the US matches had they qualified, because I don't know, from the past, I don't think a US president has ever attended, maybe when they hosted in '94.
Yeah, I believe,
But Obama didn't go to Brazil, George Bush definitely didn't go.
I believe it was Bill Clinton who welcomed the opening ceremonies for the 1994 World Cup, which was held in the U.S. So,
But as a soccer fan, I would love to see Trump really push the 2026 bid going forward
his
as
son
well.
Barron is actually a big soccer fan as well, so maybe that will sway Trump to make the trip over to Russia.
Well, he's an Arsenal fan, so we don't know how long that'll last with Arsenal's streaky record.
Alright, awesome. I like it. Lastly, we have misrep or upset, discussing the rankings of men's college basketball Division I. Just started. Most teams have only played 2 or 3 games. What do we think so far? James, I'll start with you.
Well, making the preseason rankings can't be easy, especially with a lot of these teams like Kentucky, Louisville that have one and dones, which I hope that rule goes away and they force student athletes to stay for at least 2 years. But so far we've only seen the top 25 teams lose to other top 25 teams. Texas A&M beat West Virginia. We saw the Champions Classic it was with Duke, Michigan State, Kentucky, and Kansas. That's right. Thank you, Cam. So for now, the preseason rankings look good. And you're always going to have Duke, Kansas, Kentucky, Michigan State, these teams that have great track records, even Wichita State getting themselves into the top 10 preseason this year. there's a lot of pressure on them now. But this year, I think they've hit the nail on the head.
Excellent. I would have to agree with you. It is very early and kind of hard to tell. Like you said, it's just been the only really competitive games have been rankings versus rankings. We even saw West Virginia with huge numbers against unranked teams scoring in the hundreds, low 100s and high 90s. Cameron, what are your thoughts so far early in the season?
I think the rankings have some merit to it, but at the same time, they don't. The last team that was ranked number one and finished number one was back in 2008-2009, North Carolina. Again, they have some merit to them as these are the top teams, but again, it's usually someone from the Power 5 conferences, whether it be the ACC, the Big Ten, the SEC, the Big 12, or the Pac-12, would come out as a winner. And we see as the Pac-12 really growing with Oregon, Arizona is always a hot team, and in contention, Stanford, USC this year is very, very good team. But it really shows how the beginning of the season means a little bit because you don't get into those conference games until after Christmas, until after the new year. That's where it really starts to heat up, where you'll have Duke taking on North Carolina and some of the other top teams in the ACC where they could potentially fall. Same with Michigan State, taking on some of the top teams in the Big Ten. Same with Arizona in the Pac-12. At least for the first couple weeks of the season, I don't think it has much merit to it. But in the Champions Classic as well, it really sets you where you are. Because Duke number one, I think they should be number one team with some experience and some youth. Grayson Allen, who was going to be a first-round pick after his 2015 championship win. He decided to stay a couple more years, and because of that, he's become a leader. He scored 37 points against what was supposed to be Duke's greatest opposition, against Michigan State, and he led that team and hit some big-time shots down the end of the stretch. So I'm definitely certain that these rankings are important and do matter when it comes to the later ends of the stages, but at the beginning it means not much.
Alright, awesome. My big nose, of course, is who is number one, and the Duke Blue Devils stand on top as of right now. They have Grayson Allen, who's a senior this year, who personally is a favorite of mine despite the tripping incidents. So can we expect him to stay there? Of course, Krzyzewski is a great coach, just got his 1,000th win with them. And they have some new freshmen as well, Duval and Bagley. James, how well do you think they'll do throughout the season despite their kind of early eliminations in the tournament in March?
Well, they've had a track record previously of struggling in the tournament, getting knocked out in the first, second round. I think that could change this year. As Ken mentioned, Grayson Allen, he's starting to be a proven leader, not just a senior who's there to mess around a little bit, trick players, score a few points here and there. He's proved himself. I think that'll be key for the young freshmen at Duke too. When you look at a preseason ranking, that puts a lot of pressure on incoming freshmen. Like, oh wow, I'm going to Duke, which is a great basketball school, but it's also preseason ranked number one. I have to go up to that height now. So I think Allen's there, along with Krzyzewski, who's been around forever it seems. They have some cool heads there. Getting through the Christmas period into the new year, I think they'll be fine. I would expect them to win just about every game. Still be in that number one spot, but then going along with Cam's point of the conference schedule, that'll get a little tough. It's never easy going down the road to UNC, Louisville, Notre Dame when they play their ACC opponents. So I can't see them falling out of the top 10 at all this season, but they should still be a number one team at least through Christmas into the new year.
And James, Cameron, let's go to Michigan State, ranked number 2, lost to Duke earlier this season. Has Miles Bridge back after his freshman season? How key is he and Tom Izzo in the season going forward?
I think he's a big contributor to that team as well. Again, in the Big Ten, arguably one of the best conferences in all of basketball. And Tom Izzo is a great coach. He's been on the biggest stages before, been to national championships, been to Final Fours, kind of like Coach K. But he always is able to bring new guys in, and he's had stars, and he's been able to build stars and been able to perform when needed. You saw when they went on a run where they were the 8th team in their section, and they ended up going to the Final Four, and had to bow out to eventual champions Duke. So it really shows that Tom Izzo, as a coach, really knows how to get the best out of his guys, whether they're freshmen or whether they're seniors. And I think they'll do excellent this season in the Big Ten. Just a matter of, again, when it comes down to conference, you come up against teams with historic pasts like Wisconsin and Indiana, and then obviously big rivalries like Michigan as well. it's really important to make sure that you're focused and always on point when going through this season. Coach Tom Izzo is the same and will always keep his team on point.
Excellent, and just going off of some of the talents we mentioned, Duke and Michigan State both have some key returners. However, James, you previously mentioned Kentucky, lots of one and dones. They have a lot of new young talent, Knox and Diallo for example. Do you see this kind of just being a same season as always with them, having some great athletic talent and then leaving after the season, or do you think the league and John Calipari will start to make changes?
Calipari thrives on these one and dones. I personally don't know his point of view on it, but he handles it well, he knows how to recruit, and he knows how to get them flowing. Yes, it'll take a few weeks for all the youngsters to mesh together, but the SEC, it's not one of the stronger conferences in college basketball. So once they get to the point of conference play, they usually cruise. They cruise through the conference tournament, come up against one or two tough opponents. Kentucky will be fine. Yes, a few years ago we saw them as the 8th seed in Wichita State's region in the NCAA tournament. They showed how strong they were, even though they were going up against number 1 Wichita State, who's obviously not a powered team as we would see these other ones. So regardless of where they finish, Kentucky, they should finish top of the SEC, get that automatic bid, and likely be a top 4 seed come tournament time.
All right, I like those predictions. Cameron, I have one more team for you. The reigning champs, North Carolina, the Tar Heels. They did lose some numbers, or some big key guys, but they do have Joel Berry back, who is their senior point guard now this season. They have Pinson, they have Seven Boyds. Can we see them compete for that title once again?
I think they can. Any Roy Williams team always has a chance to compete, but again, in the tough conference that is the ACC, we have to go against Duke, Miami, and then even that North Carolina triangle as well. You're going to have to play NC State, which is no tough team to beat as well. So Roy Williams and his guys will always have a chance. Just a matter of number 9 coming into the season. It's just a matter of making sure that they're doing everything that they can possibly to win. And again, if they get past January and they only have 1 or 2 losses, even undefeated, I think Roy Williams will be able to finish strong and get into that ACC tournament, have a good ACC tournament, and then eventually find himself in the March tournament as well.
I would have to agree. I think Joel Berry is very key for that team. He was excellent last season. Now that he's a senior, you can only expect him to be more mature, more of a leader, and will potentially just go off. So I have one last question for you guys. James, I'll start with you. Who's your player to watch for this season?
I'd say it's Grayson Allen. He's going to have quite a workload on his shoulders. He's going to have to carry that Duke team from now through early April, I would assume. Coach Krzyzewski, the Duke fans, the national media, they're going to watch him all year long. He needs to be smart, and if we see his performance, 37 points against Michigan State in that Champions Classic, he'll find himself up there in contention.
Excellent. And Cameron, any final comments with your player to watch?
James took words right out of my mouth. It is Grayson Allen, the senior. And he's had that experience before of being in that national stage, being in the national championship, where he was voted as, I believe he was, freshman of the year, and he was able to help that Duke team coming off the bench, and he played a major role in that win against Wisconsin. He has that experience. He's had a couple rough years as a sophomore and a junior, but now he's a senior. He's much more mature. He's ready to end his college career with a bang and hopefully end it with a national championship and bring another championship to the Cameron Crazies.
I would have to agree. Grayson Allen, a senior now, a little bit of a redemption season after the tripping incidents last year, so I believe he has a lot to prove to not only to everyone else that he's still a competitive, clean player, but to prove to himself that he's matured. He can take on that role as a senior and prepare himself for the NBA. I think he's ready for it, and this is just a season to gain that extra experience and kind of spread the wealth with his Duke Blue Devils for his final season. But that's all we have for today's show. All the valid points have been totaled, and James, you are our winner for Score Hub with 16 total points, and Cameron, you have 14. Thank you both for joining me today. Yes, I love the sportsmanship and handshakes. Those are the final scores. Thank you for joining us today from Newton, Massachusetts. We'll see you next time.